I've set a goal to do $100 million deployed by 2030 into the planet. I remember one of my covers of Ariana Grande's song went viral on Facebook at that time, got like millions of views. And
how many talents have you got?
I think we did like 6 figures in a day.
Within what, in your first year?
In the first 3 months, yeah.
This week, I'm delighted to be joined by the British entrepreneur and wildlife conservationist Akash Mehta. He is a CEO and co-founder of Fable Mane, an Ayurvedic-inspired hair wellness brand, and the founder of the Fable Fund, a philanthropic initiative supporting human-wildlife coexistence through community-driven conservation. Akash speaks at conferences and universities worldwide, including the United Nations, Harvard Business School, and TEDx, sharing his perspective on wellness, purpose, and conservation. Akash, welcome to the Boardroom.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
Yes, that's an amazing CV, by the way, and obviously you're a good speaker. People want to hear what you're saying, and you're doing some good things. Should I start the clock? You're white.
Well, I've got to ask, you've got a bit of an advantage being I believe a chess Olympian. So you have to help me out a little bit. Give me a little bit of an advantage. So if you were going to advise me to have the best move, and actually I'm going to learn something, because I always get stuck at this point. What's the best move I could do at the beginning to have the highest chance of success, especially against a titan like yourself?
Well, in chess, there's probably at the beginning there's 2 main principles.
Okay.
One is to get all your pieces out as quickly as possible. So it's almost move a few pawns, and then one move, one piece, including castling. It's about speed at the beginning to get pieces out. Obviously, if they're going to threaten to eat something, you move it. Right?
That makes sense.
The second general principle is that in chess, the middle is important. Maybe a bit like politics. The middle is important, because if you stick a piece in the middle and you look how a piece radiates around the board, a piece in the middle has a lot more power. It can reach a lot more squares and go left, right, left, right. Whereas if you stick a piece over on the side, it's limited. Yeah. So a knight on the side of the board has half the moves that a knight in the middle has. So generally, you want to occupy the middle. This is general principles. It's like business.
Amazing.
The best thing about general principles is when to break them.
My dad is definitely my biggest role model, and I think I took it
so
to...
Who is?
My dad, yeah. Yes. He's my biggest role model, and I think I took that very seriously when I actually copied his exact life. So he actually studied electronic engineering at uni. I studied electronic engineering at uni. He went into the beauty industry from there. I went into the beauty industry from
Which
there.
both are not what you'd expect from engineers.
Exactly, and also doing our own separate thing. And as you know, he actually, and then the reason why we went from engineering to our paths was we were definitely very mathematical, data-driven, and successful in our own way. But I think we realized engineering wasn't for us. So he actually ended up failing. He was at, I think, Portsmouth and didn't end up, completing it. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's true.
You don't need to be quoted. You're on film.
He'll be like, what are you talking about? But I ended up on my second year failing. I was at Imperial and I failed my second year. I did end up completing it though, so I've got that trump on my dad. So you finished
the degree.
Well,
obviously you're a smart cookie. You got into Imperial.
I wanted to...
Engineering at Imperial is nothing...
Not easy. Yeah.
Not easy to get into.
I think the hard thing for me was realizing engineering was a big part of what I loved. I wanted to work for NASA. That was my dream. And I did a lot of internships growing up before I was 18. So I did about 11 internships before I was then. And I was doing stuff at Airbus in Hamburg, BMW in Germany, and learning as much as I can, shadowing electrical engineers or mechanical engineers. And then when I did my degree, I realized it's a lot more, papers driven and theory and a lot of lab work. And I think I was a little bit more I like that, but I do want to get out of the lab. I want to meet people. I want to travel around the world. I want to have fun conversations.
Human
interaction, which often entrepreneurs base a lot of their success on, is that relationship with people, not with a computer that I felt I was spending most of my time with when I was doing engineering. So I think I lost the passion for it. And what I did at the same time, I was singing. That was my outlet. I was actually busking on the streets of London.
Wow.
Which not many people know about.
Wow.
And I used to, that was my...
that
was my outlet, The reason why that's so important to my career today is when I was working with a division of one of the record labels, they were like, Akash, it's all the social media era. You got to gain a following, start putting covers on social media because you got to get views. And I was like, so I just sing some covers and put it online. And I remember one of my covers of Ariana Grande's song went viral on Facebook at that time, got millions of views. And
How many talents have you got?
Music got me, I guess, into social media. I started getting a bit of a following
While
at
you
that
were still
time,
an engineer
while
or
I was still
studying
engineering. And then I was kind of living two lives, right? This like engineering life and the social media single life. And that time, having I had like, let's say 50,000 followers at that time on Instagram,
Wow.
and it was growing. And
You
this
obviously got a good voice. Is
it
that?
was, yeah, it was at that time. I don't know, maybe now it's gone, but it was still there.
Yes.
We can do karaoke one day. I'll show you the little bit of the songs. But the thing with me was at that time I was thinking, okay, this is quite interesting. Not many people have like an Instagram audience, because this is 13, 14, 15.
Wow.
And then what I ended up realizing was I have two potential career paths here that I think I've got data that I could have a success in. One is the engineering, because I went back, I finished my degree, and I could still do something with that. And the other part was marketing, like this digital knowledge I've got of building my own knowledge, my own account, right? The things I learned, it's not just I built my account like that. Like there are things you would do, like, you would figure out ad strategies, giveaways, and I would like grow it like a business. And I thought, I'm not interested in building my own account and be a full-time content creator at that time, because back then that was very unheard of compared to today. I was like, how can I take that knowledge and bring it to a brand? So I remember my dad, I was very fortunate, because I said to him, after Burberry, I did that marketing internship. And I said, I think digital marketing, social media is something I can bring a lot of value to these companies, but also maybe not be so junior, because I didn't want to start like as an intern when I had like an engineering degree and be on like an unpaid salary. I think like all my friends were on 6-figure finance jobs. I had to kind of accelerate my value, I think. So I got an offer to be in Estée Lauder companies. And I remember I pitched like a 70-page deck of like how I would create social media worth and value and business and ROI. And then I became the youngest ever manager at Estée Lauder companies then at 21.
And it really was sort of an accident that your singing got you into the need to market.
Yeah.
So you learn about social media and
exactly
modern marketing.
And they took a risk on a 21-year-old to be a manager, because they were
I don't think they took a risk,
Yeah.
but it was sort of necessity, which taught you a new skill, which was very hot, like right at the beginning of that era. You know?
I think that's what I felt was missing was there was a lot of stuff happening in the world, but not a lot of data or maybe thought behind it. But then I still want to make it easy to digest and simple and fun. So how do I, for example, when I was in my meeting rooms, how do I give maybe a presentation that the PR manager can be like, whoa, I get this is amazing, love it. But the CEO can get exactly what they want too, right? One's looking for more ROI, one's looking for image. And how do you get that same slide to show you both? Because let's say a slide with graphs, tables present can be a little bit difficult for someone else, whereas one has to have like 10 beautiful images. So, I started using those engineering skill sets in my career to build like these data studios and these offerings that would be like, models that didn't exist. You would just kind of maybe take something that maybe is from another industry, skin it to this industry. So taking something proven and be like, well, I can just take that model, make it PR friendly, change the data points to like an Instagram post and the likes and comments, and put a photo in front of it. But I'm using data, like, I think Excel, like Google, like smart Excels are just so interesting what you can do. But how do I make that interesting for this industry that there's not many of those mindsets in it? Because ultimately, when you look at social media, it's driven by a lot of opinions. Like my CEOs at the time would be like, well, I've been told this is the it girl. She's charging $100,000. She's the one we got to work with. I trust in the team, let's go. And I'm like, it's such a gray area. No one knows the value, because you can't measure all these touch points. When you sell, how do you know they went in travel retail and bought it? How do you know? You can't measure that. You can measure only certain touch points. But how can I make this a little bit less gray for the people that are investing money in it?
There's a saying in chess, I don't know if it's true or not. Sometimes I wonder if it's true. It's any plan is better than no plan.
Yeah.
So, because often beginners will just randomly move one piece, then the next move they'll do something else, or do something else. So having a plan gives you some coordination.
Yeah.
And do you think it's the same in business? So, you need to have some sort of plan.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can just lurch left and right and whatever the
100%.
latest idea is.
Big part of business is like, there is a bit of luck. There's a little bit of trust and like, being in the right place, the right time. But there's an awful lot of of planning that people don't see, and they assume perhaps doesn't happen. Like this is a little bit of planning. Just because you have to know, like this moment, I'm assessing like I'm a little bit screwed, but I need to minimize certain losses. So even if things are going well or not in business, you've got to plan for that.
Well, sometimes in chess, like if you start losing, and at a high level, if a person gets a pawn from you, as little as a pawn, they can convert that eventually into a win. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but a pawn, eventually all the pieces will come off, and that pawn will be made into a queen, and that will be enough.
And it's how you see it, right?
So sometimes when you're a pawn down, means you're losing, means you're struggling.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like a business which is losing money or something. You have to find a way to make it survive. And sometimes you're in survival mode playing chess. And in a long competition, you can sit there for 2 hours trying to, trying to hold on. What in your journey, from Imperial College to Dior, shaped the way that you think about building a brand?
I think what I learned is the best way to make change is always to inspire change, not to force change out of maybe certain harsh actions. So that's when I realized later on in my career, I mean, there was a moment where I felt a little bit maybe lack of representation or maybe diversity in thinking in certain rooms and meetings. And there was some things said that were kind of unforgiving. And I remember, again, do I go back and complain? And I will get change. Or do I just make the change myself? And I think that's when I decided to create my own brand, right? Premised in our own culture. So Fable Mane, I created it with my sister, and it was inspired by my grandma. So growing up, my grandma used to massage her hair with oils, and when she would massage her hair, she would read us stories. So that's why the name Fable and Mane, story and hair.
Okay. So it sounds like a surname.
It's like
literally a Fable and Mane. Okay.
And the reason why we created it is, unfortunately, both my grandmas passed away in that same year, and when I was in my last years at Dior, and matching, honoring them, wanting to create something that immortalizes their story in my head, to also seeing the lack of representation that I was frustrated with by working in these big companies. Yeah, I said, there's no Indian hair brand in the brands in the likes of Sephora. Okay, why not just create one?
What is it? It's an oil you put in your hair, and it thickens the hair.
Starting with this oil, it's like a strengthening pre-wash hair oil. So in Indian culture, we use pre-wash hair oils a lot, which is an oil that you massage into the roots, you leave it in ideally overnight, and you wash it out. And if you do this consistently, once a week, you would get healthy hair growth.
Now is this sort of hocus pocus sort of cosmetic
honestly,
claims,
well,
or is this? I'm not being.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Question,
but we're both men of science.
Yeah.
Is this?
So I mean, a lot of science wasn't done at the beginning, because this is an Ayurveda, which means knowledge of life or science of life.
Oh, that's how I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It comes from 4,000 years, so it's a 4,000-year-old science. So you can imagine, if generations passed it down and grandmas did it, and we saw the results. There is some truth.
It's been trialed.
But what we did is realize we need to put some data in it. We've got to do scientific studies. And this is where brands like ours, who are, coming in with a new age of bringing this into the Western world, bringing it with science, data, clinical trials.
So you decided to launch this product.
Yeah.
It didn't exist in the West.
And it didn't exist in Sephora, an Indian hair brand.
And so you got the ingredients?
We got the ingredients, we made the name and the oil, and we just pitched on LinkedIn to a Sephora buyer.
You made a sample product?
Yeah.
And you made it locally or in India?
In the US, actually.
In the US.
Again, planning. We knew that would be our key market.
Oh, wow.
So we thought,
okay.
Let's make it in the key market, but get the ingredients from where the best ingredients are from India, import them in. So support the local livelihoods of farmers and stuff in India, but then make it in the US, where there's really good, regulations and labs and the new frontier of technology.
So you made the sample out of the US, brought it to the UK?
No, so this is all happening. We're in the UK, ingredients from India, labs in the US, and we knew our main focus was Sephora. That was our that's the dream. And we just LinkedIn messaged a buyer we found on LinkedIn, and we said, hey, we've got this oil, we've got this concept, Fable and Mane, and you don't have an Indian brand. And India is known for what? Hair. Around 90-something% of the world's wigs are made of Indian hair, just dyed different colors. So Indians are known for strong hair. So why can't we see that representation in a brand like a retail like Sephora? They loved the concept. They invited us in. Took a couple of sick days from Dior, went to San Francisco, did my meetings, and then we knew before we knew it, they were saying, we're going to launch you day one and in stores and online and be one of the next big thing brands.
This was doing it under their brand name, not your brand
No,
name?
my brand name. This was just they were retailing us. So Sephora is a different
Oh,
retailer. They do
okay,
these
sorry.
things called in the kitchen where they really
So
spend
they
time
stopped
with
you.
the
So this
brand.
is a brand new
They
product,
stopped
hadn't
you.
sold one.
Yeah, but they want exclusivity. That's why they give you this time
okay.
to
But
give
you hadn't
this
sold
love.
one.
Not one.
It's literally in a printed up bottle
Yeah.
that you first sort of attempted this.
Yeah. I mean, they told us you need to have a shampoo. So we launched with 4 products: a shampoo,
So
a
they told you to
conditioner,
expand the range.
and launch with like a unit, like a
And
ritual.
so they wanted. So often happens with orders, they want exclusivity,
They want
so they don't want to put all the
exclusivity.
effort
That's
in.
why they
Then
put-
you sell it somewhere else.
Exactly. So we had a
And
2-year
did they?
exclusivity.
Who spent the money doing all the product
All of
design?
us. It's our brand. We own 100% of it.
No,
So
but
we
who
do all
spent
of
the
it.
money? Did they put money in at the
They
beginning?
don't put any money in. They'll
But
just
they
make
gave
the
you a
first
firm
order.
order because that's a risk, financial
They'll
risk.
give you an order, but you don't still get the money till the
No.
order's
But
placed, yeah.
just
But they let you know.
But you've got a piece of paper saying if you
Yeah.
make this, we will buy it.
I mean, they do. You know they're going to buy.
No,
it.
it's a
You
big
still-
thing
you still
because
don't know how
there's a
much,
difference
though.
because I've seen
Yeah.
companies where we might do it, then
Yeah.
they spend the money and
Yeah.
they pull out.
No, we definitely knew that would.
So they would. It was a
Yeah,
commitment.
there was a commitment.
So you felt safe
We
spending
felt
money.
safe, exactly, and we also felt safe that we would have guaranteed distribution because already, if you know you're in store, you're already guaranteeing certain orders.
How quickly did it take off?
It took off really quickly. We went viral a few weeks in.
What year are we talking
This
now?
is 2020, COVID.
So we're in the world of social media is now a
Social media.
force.
This is when I used my knowledge.
And you knew how to do that.
Exactly, and we went viral, and that was really exciting because we became one of the top hair oils at Sephora, and we sold out. I think we did like 6 figures in a day.
Within what? In your first year?
In the first 3 months, yeah.
Reminds me of reggae sauce.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
And we were COVID. It was lockdown, and people were investing. People could go to salons.
People were spending money on.
And I think that's what made Sephora even more excited to trust in us and to invest. In
And
us.
then, so that was an exclusive. So
It was exclusive.
but you didn't. They were the big retailer anyway.
Yeah. And then
But was the
photography.
exclusivity in the US only, or
US
was it
only.
global?
Because we
Sorry,
just
it was a
launched
US.
US only, North
So
America.
then you could come into Europe wherever else
Exactly.
and start selling it.
Yeah.
Which is what you did.
which is what we did.
How
we ended
quickly
up-
did you do that?
Thanks to my dad, who's global business leader. He was very keen on us doing it soon. So we went straight away we actually launched in Boots first, a couple of months in.
And
we
they
went into
took you on the
Glass.
back of how well it's selling in the States. It was a lot
Exactly.
easier.
Yeah,
So
it's
all
definitely
from one LinkedIn post. Sometimes I say it's not luck,
No.
but you create your luck and it's randomness. But
Yeah.
who would have thought one LinkedIn post
Can
gets
be-
that and then next minute?
And I will also say, there's many choices we can have. At that time, the CEO of Dior, who I was telling about having this brand, he said, I know the CEO of Sephora, should I connect you? And I said, thank God I did, no. Because I said, I don't want a CEO telling someone in their team, look at this brand. I want them to find it and they get excited by it. I don't want it on their table like that.
There's a thing in business, you probably heard it, not invented here.
Yeah.
And it's a thing in management where if you want someone to do something, get them to think of it. So,
Yeah.
oh, was it your idea to move that over there?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like that idea of yours. And
Because they're the ones doing all the work. Let them feel the most excited
you don't
by it.
impose it, but it's a bit like
Exactly.
that. And not invented here in
No.
a way. If people haven't invented it,
Yeah.
if you're trying to sell something into another company and their technical team hasn't invented it, they automatically say it's no good.
Exactly.
So the fact that was a clever way of doing it to get
Yeah.
it to sort of be their idea
Their
rather
idea.
than
And then timing. If they said no, if they didn't reply, then yeah, maybe I would use that.
you
know.
could go back to
So
option
you
A
kind of
to
it's
plan
like
B.
chess, right?
Plan B.
You have options.
So that was a phenomenal success, and clever and with good fortune and, some good backing and some
Yeah.
listening to other people, which
Yeah.
is all very clever. But so tell me about your fund.
Yeah,
I'll
so
make a move.
in building Fable Mane, which is going really well now, it's been 5 years, I still felt when I was doing it and we built our businesses, we're doing really well, I didn't feel fully fulfilled. I felt there was something missing and the numbers weren't just enough. And I felt we have a tiger as a logo and what are we doing to give back to this planet? So I decided to launch the Fable Fund on my own. And we're going to be announcing this week, actually, that 2% of all net sales of Fable and Mane is going to the Fable Fund every year,
okay.
which is very exciting.
All right, I'm going to put you in check because we need
That's
to get this
fine.
game moving. No, your
I'm
check,
gonna-
your king is attacked.
Yeah, I'm going to...
That's our first check of the game, I think. Some of the sales from the business go into the fund.
Yeah.
And then the fund is for wildlife.
Yeah, so the fund is its own entity. And the idea is that's going to be my long-term focus on my life. So I want to eventually move to become a full-time, an impact entrepreneur, but a full-time conservationist at the same time.
Right.
And I've set a big goal. So my goal is, because I really believe if I can do a lot with business, why can I try to have big goals and impact? So I've set a goal to do $100 million deployed by 2030 into the planet. We put money into projects around the world, focusing on saving species. And at the same time, I'm going to move this here. At the same time, we share them our donation work through films, so people can see what we're doing.
Okay.
I think that's very important. They're on YouTube, and each film I bring a different
search for Fable Fund.
Fable Fund, and there are different celebrities that come with me on these trips.
Wow.
And they're featured.
Well, I'm, like a celebrity.
So
and
maybe one day
animals.
We can do it, exactly. I think my biggest question is thinking about impact. You've done amazing investing and building businesses. How do you think about impact in the businesses that you build and invest in?
Well, it's funny answering about impact to someone who's an environmentalist, obviously, and I am an environmentalist. I grew up. I love the countryside of Australia particularly, but and I'm very worried about global climate change. But for business, for me, the joy I get is changing people's lives and the old disruption. It's not just, I don't sort of think of it as disrupting a market. I think of getting people to do something different. Yeah. And so I did a private members club here, which is a restoration of a beautiful building. Home house. I've
been there many times. It's amazing.
The number of people who came there, and every time, from Prince Charles to Paul McCartney to Bill Clinton to Brad Pitt, it just goes on and on. So but cool. If I hadn't have done that, and it got to a point I was sitting in Sydney, I had to write another check because it was always, overblown budget, had to write another check. I'm like, ugh. But every time I think about how, even for 5 minutes, for Paul McCartney had a party there, for hours I changed his life. Yeah. And I know it's not something I would sort of say to him or say to, it's just like having that impact. Yeah. And so that's the sort of fun side of it. But also, in a way, if you do something disruptive that can help people. So, and that might be anything that it might be, obviously I've backed pharmaceutical companies, but they can all help people. So I view business as helping people. People buy things because it helps them. And I think I don't think I'd invest in tobacco, or I don't think I'd particularly invest in
businesses that are good for the
planet. I don't think I'd invest in coal, not that I'm going to tie myself to a tree, as I said, but I don't think I'd do that. So that's sort of how I measure that impact by changing people's lives.
And these conscious little decisions add up.
Yeah. And and another big way is the impact very personally. If you change your staff's life, you're creating jobs, and that is really sad. Like I pay for these people.
You're giving them their families and everything. There's a whole inferred effect that happens.
Yeah.
So.
And I learned early on when I was an investment banker that you train people to do your job. It's sort of opposite to what you were experiencing, where you want people to grow. Yeah. And and it is actually really fun once you put yourself in that mindset, and if a manager gets that good that he gets poached by someone else, you stay friends, changing people's lives, creating jobs. That's the nice side of it. But it always comes back to making money, because if it's not making money, then it's kind of probably not changing people's lives. I agree. And the jobs aren't sustainable. Okay, now finally, can you see what the final coup de grace is?
Yeah. You're going to take this.
Yeah, that king's blocked in by these two pawns. It's almost like you draw a line like that.
I'm going to lose no matter what.
And then
go for it. That's checkmate. Well done. Hey, I'm glad it lasted this long.
Yes.
That's a win.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a good, good thing to chat over, wasn't it?
No, yes. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've learned a lot, and I think we have to do a round 2 out of podcast, and I'm going to properly focus and try to have a bit less of a mistake.
I was trying to distract you with interesting questions or tricky questions.
You did such a good job.
That was really fun. Akash is an inspiring young gentleman, and he has so many different talents. He's an engineer, he's involved in marketing, he's done product design, and now he's getting involved in conservation. He's just a fascinating young person to meet. His energy level is jumping off the chair when I'm talking to him. And when he was playing chess, it was really quite interesting, because the way he spoke, I thought he was going to be quite an aggressive chess player. And then he ended up being quite passive and taking his time and being quite nervous. But, he developed more confidence as we went by. One thing I really noticed about him, he's very keen to learn. He asked me a lot of questions about myself and a lot of questions about chess. So everything he does, I think he's a bit of a perfectionist. He matches creativity and logic and brings them together. And what he's done in his young life is astounding. So nothing but respect to this gentleman. So that's it for this week's episode of The Boardroom. I hope you found it as enjoyable and insightful as I did. We'll be back next week with another fascinating guest. But in the meantime, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. Equally, if you know someone who's interested in starting or scaling a business and would benefit from hearing from the likes of Akash or myself, please share this episode. And I would love to know what you thought of it, so please leave a comment in the box below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week in The Boardroom.